You might be surprised to hear that one of the greatest philosophers in history had some not-so-nice things to say about women. But what exactly did he say and why? In this video, we're going to dive into the controversial views of Aristotle when it comes to women. We'll explore his beliefs and try to understand the context in which they were formed. It's important to remember that Aristotle lived in ancient Greece around 2,000 years ago, a time vastly different from our own. His ideas may shock and disturb us now, but they also offer a fascinating glimpse into the evolution of human thought. So let us embark on this journey through history and uncover the surprising truth about Aristotle's views on women. Aristotle's views on women were shaped by the social norms and expectations of ancient Greek society. In this patriarchal system, men and women had distinct roles and were often viewed as unequal. Now, Aristotle's views on women can be found scattered throughout his various works, making it challenging to get a comprehensive picture. However, by examining his writings on topics like politics, ethics, and biology, we can piece together his overall perspective. One of the most revealing passages comes from his work Politics, where he discusses the ideal state and the roles of citizens within it. According to Aristotle, the ideal state was one in which all citizens participated in government and worked for the common good. However, he believed that women should be excluded from public life and that their role was to manage the household and bear children. He argued that women were inferior to men in terms of intelligence and rationality, and therefore unfit to participate in politics. This view was widely held in ancient Greece and was based on the belief that women were naturally weaker and more susceptible to emotions than men. Aristotle also believed that women were less rational than men and that they were better suited to domestic life rather than public life. He argued that women were emotional and less able to think logically and rationally, which he believed were necessary for participation in politics. He also believed that women were physically weaker than men and that they were not as capable of defending themselves or the state. Therefore, Aristotle advocated for a patriarchal system in which men were in charge of making decisions both at home and in the state, while women were relegated to the domestic sphere. He believed that this was the natural order of things and that it was necessary for the stability and well-being of the state. Aristotle's views on women have been heavily criticized by modern standards. They appear to be deeply sexist and discriminatory. However, it is important to remember that he was writing in a completely different time period, and his views were shaped by the social norms and expectations of his day. It is also important to note that Aristotle wasn't the only person of his time who held these views. Women were generally seen as inferior to men and were denied many of the rights and opportunities that men enjoyed. However, despite the pervasiveness of these beliefs, there are some interesting points to consider. First, Aristotle's views on women were more nuanced than those of some of his contemporaries. For example, he didn't believe that women were incapable of acquiring knowledge or engaging in intellectual pursuits. In fact, he praised the intelligence and wit of some women he knew personally. Secondly, Aristotle's views on women evolved over time. In his earlier works, he was more critical of women and their role in society. But in his later works, he became more accepting of women's capabilities and contributions. Finally, it's important to note that Aristotle's views on women were not entirely negative. He recognized that women had a valuable role to play in society and that they could make significant contributions to the family and the state through their work in the domestic sphere. He also believed that women were capable of being virtuous and that they should be treated with respect and dignity. Despite these nuances, however, Aristotle's views on women were ultimately shaped by the patriarchal society in which he lived, and they have rightfully been heavily criticized. His ideas contributed to the oppression of women for centuries, and they continue to be a reminder of the challenges we face in achieving gender equality even today. Now, aside from Aristotle's views on women in politics, his views on women's nature and capabilities were also prevalent in his other works. In his biological studies, Aristotle made some shocking observations about women's bodies. According to him, women's reproductive organs were located in the center of their bodies, unlike men's, which were located outside. This observation led him to conclude that women were more emotional and less rational than men, because their emotions were considered to be generated in the center of the body near the heart. This is truly shocking to us today because it shows how little Aristotle understood about female anatomy. In reality, women's reproductive organs are located in the pelvic region, just like in men, and there is no scientific basis for the claim that they are more emotional than men, simply because their reproductive organs are located internally. Moving on, Aristotle also believed that women were incomplete men, and that they were produced from a male creature called a testis. He argued that women were not complete human beings, and that they were somehow lesser than men. This view was widely held in ancient Greece, and was based on a misunderstanding of human biology. Aristotle was wrong about women's reproductive organs being in the middle of their bodies, and he was also incorrect about women being produced from a creature called a testis. These beliefs reflect a lack of understanding of female anatomy and reproduction, which was limited at the time. However, it's important to note that Aristotle's views were not entirely without their time. He wasn't the only person who believed that women were somehow lesser than men. This belief was widespread and deeply ingrained in Greek culture. Lastly, Aristotle's views on women also extended to his views on marriage and family. He believed that women should be married off as soon as possible after puberty to prevent them from becoming sexually promiscuous. He also believed that women should be subservient to their husbands and fathers, and that they should not have the right to own property or make their own economic decisions. These views were again shaped by the social norms and expectations of ancient Greek society and were widely held at the time. Now, while Aristotle's views on women were deeply flawed and often contradictory, they also offer us an important lesson. It reminds us that even the greatest minds of history were products of their time, and that their views should be examined within the context of the society in which they lived. It also teaches us that we should never stop questioning and challenging the status quo, and that we should always strive to be open-minded and tolerant towards others, even when their views are very different from our own. In conclusion, Aristotle's views on women were a product of his time, shaped by the social norms and expectations of ancient Greek society. Despite his belief in women's inferiority, there were some inconsistencies and complexities in his views that provide an interesting study for those interested in the evolution of gender roles and attitudes. While his ideas may seem shocking and disturbing today, they also offer us a valuable lesson in the importance of challenging the status quo and embracing diversity in all its forms. Thank you for joining me on this thought-provoking journey through history. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to show your support. Your engagement means the world to me and helps me continue sharing these fascinating stories. Before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you find most surprising about Aristotle's views on women? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're eager to learn more, I've included additional resources for further exploration. Until next time, stay curious and keep asking questions.